Good day! You want to learn about cognitive view of learning? So first, what is learning? Learning is a change of thought involved when individual process new information, just like paying attention, interpreting a graph, giving example, and using new concepts with prior knowledge. So what is cognitive theory? Cognitive theory is just one of the theories in psychology, but it states that learning is a change of relatively enduring information because of mental structures. And this mental structures change can lead to behavioral change. So what is the difference between behavioral view and cognitive view? Cognitive view states that different individuals construct individual differences even though they interact in the same environment. And these individual differences can predict the outcome of learning, while behavioral view states that when individual differences occur, it is due to conditioning, early conditioning in an early age, such as the amount of punishment given and the amount of reinforcement. So how can this information process inside the human brain? There appears the information processing model. Information processing model relates to us on how human beings acquire, store, and recall different information inside our head. There are three systems involving the processing of new information. So the first memory system is called sensory memory. Sensory memory is the first who comes in contact with the environment. It uses sensory registers. The sensory registers is the one that holds information in the environment, which is in its raw and processed form. So sensory register uses your sense of seeing or visual, auditory, olfactory, tactile, and gustatory. This kind of system only holds information in a short period of time. When the stimuli is removed or gone, the information stays a brief moment and it's gone. So how does an information stored in a sensory memory can be transferred to a working memory, or what we call short-term memory? This is the time where attention and perception occur. Attention and perception requires in moving those information to working memory. So what is working memory? So working memory is the second memory system, but we will discuss it later. But first, let us define what is attention. Attention is allocating your cognitive resources into a single stimuli or task. So when a teacher discusses to you, you can't focus because there's a lot of variables or there's a lot of noise around you. But when attention is given, it can be diverted. For example, when a student is so focused on working his laboratory experiment, that certain attention can be shifted when the environment was being salient. So, when a student is so focused on what the teacher is teaching, it is a great achievement to the side of the teacher. But there are two types of attention, or two types why attention is being processed. First is automatic processing. Individuals should practice every day or even oftenly to achieve this kind of processing, because when you achieve this, it requires a minimal use of cognitive resources. But when it comes to conscious processing, it is extremely demanding when it comes to cognitive resources. So in this kind of processing, it requires full attention. So let's talk about the second thing to transfer sensory memory to working memory. It's perception. We all know what is perception, but to explain it thoroughly, perception is a cognitive process that gives meaning to sensory input. It is basing on the experiences or personal experiences of a person. By these two processes, a sensory memory can move now to working memory. So now, let us discuss what is working memory. Working memory, or also called short-term memory, is a second main system in processing information. It stores information with meaning. So this kind of system just store information temporarily, unlike long-term memory, which would be the last kind of system. So This system involves three main parts. First is the visuospatial sketchpad, which is the visual and the spatial information. Second is the phonological loop, which involves the sounds and words information. And lastly, the central executive, which is the one who is responsible for focusing attention, integrating, and organizing information. So in short, this central executive is the one who will manipulate the information that goes on the visuospatial sketchpad in the phonological loop. What is the limitation of information being stored in the working memory? According to some studies, adults store 5 to 9 bits of information. What is bits? Bits is the amount of information which has meanings being stored into the working memory. But it only has to be stored in 15 to 30 seconds. Maintenance rehearsal is one of the main techniques on how to store information in a long period of time. Rehearsal means repeating words until it is stored and being remembered into your brain. But first, let us talk about how process or information being transferred to the long-term memory by the use of storing and encoding. Storing is copying new information to the other part of the memory, while encoding is elaborating the ideas part of that information by using another technique, which is meaningful learning, which is using that information to relate your experiences or your ideas. There are a lot more techniques on how we transfer ideas into the long-term memory. First is organizing, second is elaborating, third is categorizing, and fourth is rehearsals. It involves how you actually use those techniques. By elaborating, you should elaborate the ideas for you to remember it. For organizing, you should organize those ideas to learn or remember those things. For rehearsals, you should be repeating it. Put it in your mind. And lastly, to organize things, just for you to remember it easily. By storing this information in the long-term memory, how can we get it back for us to use it? We should use retrieval. Retrieval is pulling back information you've stored in that system. Retrieval and knowledge activation is retrieving information to answer the questions you have in mind. But if that certain knowledge activation cannot answer that question, you have to use retrieval and knowledge reconstruction. By knowledge activation can answer that certain question in your mind, you can use that knowledge reconstruction to answer it. And lastly, retrieval and forgetting. There are a lot of studies states that when a knowledge or an information is stored in a very long time, it has a possibility to be forgotten or to be decayed. There are three possibilities why knowledge or why information has been forgotten. First, it has decayed, is not used. Second, information was interfered with new information. Lastly, what is long-term memory? Long-term memory is what we call the long or large amount of information was being stored. Therefore, cognitive view of learning involves how we process different information using cognitive processors, or what we call mental processes, involving three main systems, which is short or working, long-term memory, and sensory memory. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned.